I started watching in 1998. I was very much into Stone Cold Steve Austin. Kids at school were talking about it, and they weren't like, you know, automatically deemed losers. When I walked through the curtain, you're probably getting something in the realm of some dude just came up and pushed my wife in front of me, right? Actually saw professional wrestling at Whalen Park. It was a big part of my childhood. It started to become a big part of my sort of formative teenage years. When you talk about the good and the bad things that came out of the pandemic, obviously there was a lot of bad, but in terms of one of the good things of it is I think fans now understand just how vital and important they are to the story itself, and I think that they're way more invested, and I think that that's a huge vital part of it.
Insane in the half-brain.
One brain, one wheel, infinite topics. The DIJAK interview.
All right, man, Chris, I want to take this time to just say thank you for coming on. You know, as both avid fans of wrestling, you know, we followed your career. I wrestled, I started to train at New England Pro Wrestling Academy about 2 years ago, 2.5 years going on. And then to see you, you know, on WWE, NXT, from starting at NEPWA, going up to, you know, the big times, it was really cool, really neat. And it offered like a cool, almost like this, if you follow us, you can make it, just like these people have. And it was really neat. And yeah, as I said, man, thank you for coming on today, and thank you for sharing this time, and we're gonna have some good conversations.
Yeah, it's great to be here. Thanks for having me.
So I'm Sean, this is Kyle.
What's up, guys?
So you're about 10 years older than us. What was it like growing up as a local Tri-Town boy in that time?
I guess we had a lot more leeway. I know I kind of try to envision myself growing up, even 10 years later. I mean, there was already, you know, smartphones were becoming a thing, and a lot of the stuff I did, even as like a 14-year-old and 15-year-old, because when I was 14 was probably about 2001.
Okay, yeah.
Cell phones existed, but not really. It was like a box Nokia on like my mom's plan or whatever. So like you could make a phone call, but that's about it.
Yeah.
So you had like the flip phones pretty much, right?
I had a flip phone in 2002 or 3.
Yeah.
So that was probably when I was 15 or 16. Some of the stuff that we were doing was just kind of like, at the time it was like a boys will be boys sort of thing. But in hindsight, like if there was video of us doing some of the stuff that we were doing, probably wouldn't reflect as well.
Yeah, totally agree, man.
So what about like Whalen Park? I mean, unfortunately, our generation didn't experience it. You know, it kind of shut down when we were like 4 or 5 years old. Was that a big frequent for you?
It was. I actually saw professional wrestling at Whalen Park, believe it or not.
Oh, wow, okay.
We used to run shows there. I couldn't tell you who was on it or anything like that, but I remember I used to go to Whalen Park for, I mean, I used to go all the time, right? Some of my earliest memories are from Whalen Park, but then as I got older, because I think it shut down in 2000, 2001.
Yeah, right around that. I think I was like 4 years old at the time.
Yeah, maybe even as late as 2002. I don't remember the exact time frame. But I remember going to like Pokemon card tournaments there and stuff like that. So I was probably 13 or 14. And if I went to wrestling shows, it was probably somewhere around 14 years old. Yeah. So yeah, it was a big part of my childhood. It started to become a big part of my sort of formative teenage years. And then of course it got shut down, and now it's just a bunch of condominiums. So yeah, kind of a bummer. It was always sort of the highlight of Lunenburg, Massachusetts. It was like that was our claim to fame. And now it's like, I don't know, the basketball courts, I guess. There's just not much else there.
Exactly.
Did you ever go to the, like, when they had the drive-ins there, did you ever, like, stop at the drive-ins to catch some movies, too?
Yeah, drive-ins all the time.
Yeah.
That Lunenburg or Fitchburg, I know it was right on the border.
Yeah, it's
It was
right on
like
the
on
line.
the
I think it
border.
might be like Fitchburg technically.
Technically, yeah.
I think it's technically Fitchburg, yeah, because if it was technically Lunenburg, we would have proclaimed it from the rooftops. Like, because there was such nothing to do in Lunenburg that we wanted to, like, stake our claim in everything. Because, Leominster and Fitchburg had all the cool stuff to do. Lunenburg just didn't have anything. So,
Yeah.
it was like Whalen Park, end of list. But yeah, we all went to the drive-ins as kids and as teenagers. I think that might even still, is that still open or
No, they got rid of it and put also a whole bunch of apartments over there.
Condominiums.
Oh, is there more apartments? Yeah.
Yep.
I mean, it's the kind of thing, when I remember going as late as, like, I think I went when I was 18 or 19 years old even. But then it gets to the point, it's like, I don't know, why am I going to go to the drive-ins anymore? It's the same thing as Whalen Park, right? Like, I would have, even if it didn't shut down, like, I would have stopped going when I was 17 years old and not gone again and not thought about it until, I had my own kids. And then I would be like, oh, let's go to Whalen Park.
Exactly, yeah.
There's these big gaps of like 15 years where I wouldn't have known regardless. So, the timing is okay in that sense.
Yeah. So what made you enjoy wrestling as a form of entertainment, and when did you get introduced to it first?
So I started watching in 1998, which was obviously like the height of the Attitude. Maybe not the height, but it was, it was a real upsurge in
like
the
a
Attitude
critical
Era.
point
At the point where kids at school were talking about it and they weren't like, automatically deemed losers for liking professional wrestling. I know my brother was becoming into it, and a lot of his friends were as well. So I kind of started to follow in that path. At that point, I was trying to, kind of like secretively watch it because I wasn't really allowed to watch it, and rightfully so. It was content at that point, 1998, that
Yeah, it was pretty.
Should have been watching.
It was definitely raunchy,
Yeah.
back then.
Yeah. It was a bit over the top. But I still found a way to watch it. I would now I haven't ever told this story, but we had VHS tapes, and I used to sneak it into the VHS, like when no one was looking, and change the channel and then turn the TV off, and it would still record what was playing on the satellite dish or whatever.
Oh, nice.
So I'd secretly record it while no one was watching the TV. And then, of course, you would only see the little red light. So if nobody noticed, my dad might come down and change the channel and watch whatever he wanted to watch. And then I'd go to watch Monday Night Raw back, and then I'd see the channel change. I'd be like, no, I missed it.
That's hilarious.
That's just kind of the way it was back in 1999, I guess. So,
who were some inspirations for you at that time? Like they're on your television, and you see a certain someone wrestling, and who exactly like definitely influenced you? Upon seeing them.
I wouldn't say influence per se, because I never really stylized myself much after anyone in particular in terms of a wrestler, but in terms of who I liked and who I supported as a young fan, I was very much into Stone Cold Steve Austin. He was obviously popularity, and he was my favorite. It's always funny thinking back as a kid who you like and why. And, it's always, it's pretty much always whoever's presented as like the top babyface or whatever. But it's funny how loyal children are, because in the pro wrestling landscape, you have to be constantly evolving and changing. So people change from good guy to bad guy constantly. But as a kid, you're like, no, that's my guy. And you're trying to figure out why they're being an asshole now. But as a kid, it's like, whatever, that's my guy. He's being a piece of shit, but I have to keep supporting him. I can't I'm not just going to start booing my favorite person in the world just because they turned on The Rock or whatever. It's like, oh, well, I guess I got to keep supporting him. You know, so it's funny how we kind of don't think of that as wrestlers or as bookers.
100%. Yeah, and I'll even raise you that because I remember right when you know, growing up, Edge was always a favorite for me, and when I think it was in 2011 when he turned face for like the first time in like years, right before he had to vacate the title due to his injury, and that 14-year-old self just like was like head over heels, just like, oh my God, he's a good guy now. The crowd's cheering for him, and it was really cool to see.
Yeah.
How would you say yourself is different from the, you know, DIJAK? Like, how is Christopher Dijakovic different from DIJAK, and how did your like most famous gimmicks come to be, and how did you formulate them in the early stages in your mind?
Well, for starters, my real name is DIJAK, not Dijakovic. Dijakovic is actually a work name that Triple H assigned me in NXT. So DIJAK is my real last name. Honestly, the best characters, especially something like a professional wrestler, which is less of like more often than not the best version of it, because it's so fluid and it's so on, right? There's such this expectation that you're presenting something that's, you know, a parallel to your real life. More often than not, the best characters are something that draw on at least pieces of reality, if not a full reality.
Of course.
Just, you know, in different stages, right? As human beings, we all have different versions of ourselves, right? You know, there's the version of me when I'm playing with my kid, and then there's the version of me when I'm interacting with my wife, and then there's the version of me when I'm doing an interview or doing a podcast, and they're all three separate versions of me. So there's a version of me that's a very, you know, that just got, I don't know, cut off in traffic, or some guy just walked up to me and pushed my wife or something, right? That's a version of me that exists, and that's probably the closest version of Donovan DIJAK that you're going to get, right? Like when I walk through the curtain, you're probably getting something in the realm of some dude just came up and pushed my wife in front of me, right? That's kind of the attitude that I'm going to take into the ring, which honestly isn't a huge departure from like me going into a basketball game or me going into a football game, right? You know, that I'm sort of a very at least back when I played, I was extremely competitive. I was very confrontational. I was an antagonist. I used to convince myself that I hated the opponent, right? It just, whatever reason, that was my motivating factors. That's just kind of the way that I approached sports and game. So for me to, you know, flick the switch and become that, what's usually a bad guy, but even if I'm not a bad guy, I'm extremely confrontational, you know, extremely, I'm very much an agitator, right? You know, even as a good guy, I'm usually, you know, estering or running my mouth, or, you know, whatever thing I do or I approach and bring to the ring. And then the character itself, you know, has a lot of elements of my criminal justice background and investigatory days and things like that. So yeah, that's just kind of the approach that I take. You know, we all have different sort of versions of ourselves, and that's one of mine. And I'm able to flip that switch relatively easily, especially when I know that, you know, physicality is on the horizon. That's super simple for me.
How do you juggle between, you know, having, you know, being a family man and, you know, being on the road? Obviously, you know, being in Orlando when you were in NXT, but now you're, I'd say, more local. How do you juggle that, you know, between being at home, being on the road?
Yeah, it depends. You mentioned Orlando, which obviously for about almost 2 years, I was constantly going back and forth to Orlando almost every week, right? You know, my normal schedule was fly to Orlando on when would I go? On Sunday nights? Yeah, I would go on Sunday nights. and then I would spend all day Monday like prepping and training and stuff like that. Or maybe I'd go on Monday morning. I don't remember, either Sunday night or Monday morning, one of the two. And then I'd stay until either, it would vary from week to week. I'd stay until either Wednesday morning, or sometimes I'd stay until Saturday morning, and I'd stay a whole week there, and you know, just help with training and do some live events on the weekends and stuff. Just so it was a little more of that sort of NXT feel to it, right? As opposed to flying to work and leave and stuff like that. There's a few more components and pre-tapes and stuff like that with the NXT landscape. So yeah, that was it was busy, but it was almost regimented in a way that, you know, it felt like you could get into a real pattern and a routine. And I had like a decent amount of my weekends with my children, whereas now you mentioned that that I'm a little more local, which I wish were the case. Some weekends it is, right? Some weekends I get lucky. It's, you know, Leominster on Friday night, and then Maine on Saturday night, and then, you know, wherever, Rhode Island on Sunday. And that's a great weekend for me, right? Because I get to spend every morning with my children, and then just kind of go to these local shows where I drive and I come home and I sleep in my own bed, and then I get the next morning with my kids, and that's always great.
Of course.
More often than not, I'm flying all over the place, and you just don't hear about it. I go everywhere. I was just in Indiana. My Saturday, this past Saturday, I woke up at 4 a.m. I took a flight to Philadelphia, and I took another flight to Louisville, and then I drove to Indiana, did a show, finished the show, drove back to Louisville, flew to Chicago, and then flew back to New Hampshire and slept in my own bed. It was probably the busiest 24 hours I've ever had in professional wrestling.
Oh my God.
Maybe not the busiest 24 hours, but the busiest like calendar day. Because I woke up at 4 a.m. and I went to bed at 11 p.m. and the whole day was travel and wrestling, and it's like my head was spinning, you know. But that's a normal independent professional wrestling day. You know, there's been weekends where I have to go to, you know, Canada, and then Boston, and then London, and then back. And I was in Germany a couple weeks ago. I'm just all over the place. Way more travel than I ever did with WWE. With WWE, my normal schedule was TV and home, and that was it.
Yeah, because you're definitely flying all over the place now, you know, because the locations aren't as concrete, obviously, as they were previously. I got you. Throughout your career, what has been your favorite match and least favorite match that you've worked?
Wow. My favorite match is the Iron Survivor Challenge from Deadline last year.
Okay, yeah, that was a great match.
December 2023. Yeah, so not even a year old yet. But just one of my favorite matches of all time. It is my favorite match of all time. It was just tremendous. I loved every second of it. My least favorite match of all time. Ooh, I got a great answer for this. It's a triple threat. Oddly enough, not the one that you have pictured right there, which was also a WrestleMania takeover triple threat. This was a different WrestleMania takeover triple threat. This was myself, and you'll be surprised to hear myself, Keith Lee, and Damian Priest.
Oh,
and
wow.
The reason that I hate this match so much is because it was supposed to be the match that took place at WrestleMania takeover in Tampa, Florida in 2020. But obviously COVID hit and that all got canceled. We ended up having this match at Full Sail in front of literally nobody. It was just an empty ring with a screen and like a cameraman in the room, because you could only have like 6 people in a room at a time. And we had this match, and when I tell you, it was the most painful, dreadful experience of my life, because what we built in our minds and what we wanted and expected out of this match was impossible. We just couldn't.
Of course.
Because the whole thing is built on spectacle, right? It's these huge guys doing these big, impressive moves with the crowd reacting and these huge reactions and stuff like that. It's not like little intricate like joint manipulation and stuff where commentary can be like, oh, he's doing this, and the people are sitting on their edge of their seat watching like what's going to happen next. No, it was like Godzilla versus King Kong, like buildings blowing up and things like that. So we're doing these moves and these spots that we envision doing in front of 15,000 people or whatever. And it's just silence, and it just hurts, and I'm like, this is the worst thing I've ever done in my life. Like I've never watched it back because it was dreadful to do. It was a miserable experience for all of us. I think we all hated it. We all hated to do it. It was just, there was no way. We gave it 100% effort. We gave it our best effort, but like the whole thing was built around like spectacle and reactions, and it's just not a spectacle. It's just three guys in a ring and silence, and it was like, boy, this sucks. So yeah, that's one that, and those are two of my best friends in the world and guys that I love to wrestle, and some of my best matches of all time are with Keith Lee and Damian Priest. So there's plenty of matches of ours that I love, but that one in particular, I think the three of us would love to just erase
from the history.
And see, I think that's like how like the fans actually understood. Like us fans have you guys like cheering. You build off from that, and not having that at all.
Massively.
Yeah, it must have just like.
I think there's actually been a big shift in the way that fans approach and treat professional wrestling since the pandemic happened. Yeah. We talk about the good and the bad things that came out of the pandemic. Obviously, there was a lot of bad. But in terms of one of the good things of it is I think fans now understand just how vital and important they are to the story itself. And I think that they're way more invested in
absolutely. I totally agree.
The storylines and who to boo and who to cheer and how important it is to boo and cheer and stuff like that. And I think that that's a huge, vital part of it.
Yeah, absolutely. Who gave you the best advice in the wrestling business, and what was it?
I've received a ton of great advice. Most recently, I got advice from CM Punk. I won't disclose what the advice was, just because it's personal to me. But and I've talked about this before. It's nothing world bending or groundbreaking or anything like that. It's something that lots of guys hear from multiple people in the professional wrestling industry. But this specific piece of advice coming from him just really clicked with me, and for better or for worse, right? Obviously this happened in early 2024, so obviously there's been a lot of changes in my professional wrestling landscape since then. So but to me, I felt most at home with myself and my presentation and my character, and I felt the most comfortable being myself than I ever did in that period of time. So that's kind of the approach that I'm taking now, and whether that's worked out for me or whether that will work out for me, who knows? Sometimes things are a blessing in disguise. So who knows?
Yeah, absolutely, man, absolutely. From what I understand, you're now an instructor at New England Pro Wrestling Academy, right?
That's correct.
Obviously the very same school you originally trained at. Do you see anyone who's currently training at that school right now that you can see making it all the way to the top? Just like, obviously yourself, Carmelo, Ivar, and Ciampa have all.
Yeah, almost impossible to predict, especially in today's professional wrestling landscape. There's lots of potential, but I mean, the days are gone where like someone walks through the door and you look at them and go, "Oh, that guy's gonna be in WWE," right? I think that's kind of the thing that I got sort of labeled with as soon as I walked through, because I came in 2012 when obviously Vince was still running things
right,
pretty much in control, and he loved big guys and he loved tall guys, and So everyone looked at me and they said, "Oh, he's going to be in WWE right away," and it actually didn't work out. I had a tryout in 2013, and they said no, they passed on me, so I ended up having to go the quote unquote small guy route, and I went to Ring of Honor. It was kind of this roundabout way in terms of getting there. And then once I got there, Vince didn't care at all that I was tall. He changed my gimmick. He didn't get, he wouldn't listen to any of my pitches, so he didn't care at all. He had moved on from tall guys, I guess, at that point. And it's just different now. It's just totally different. So they don't care if you're tall. They don't care if they're much more concerned about like how many boxes you check. Mm-hmm. And only one of those boxes is professional wrestling. There's a ton of other boxes.
Of course.
You just gotta fill out as much of that pie chart as possible. So I almost don't even. I focus on the professional wrestling. I say who's at what point in their professional wrestling, because a lot of it is luck, right?
Yeah,
right.
Of course.
I can't point the finger at someone and say, oh, they're going to be a star, because ultimately it's just some other guy's decision based on whatever random thing they're looking for at that time. So what I tell the kids is I say, hey, focus on the things you can control, worry about the stuff you can control. This is going to be about in-ring, and maybe we'll do some stuff on promos and character and stuff, but promo and character is going to be a lot on you. In-ring, I can help you with a lot more in terms of we're in here, we can work on footwork, I can control timing, pacing, all that stuff. That's a piece of the puzzle, and it's an important piece, but it's not, the most important piece, unfortunately, but it's the thing that you can control the most, and it's the reason why you're at this school. So that's what we focus on, and we work in stages and we progress and things like that. So that's kind of the approach that I take to professional wrestling. And unfortunately, that's just the way that this business is.
Yeah, of course.
It's not a real sport. It's a play. It's a presentation.
As you said, a spectacle.
Right.
Yeah. Ultimately, the top companies are just trying to make as much money as they possibly can. That's
right.
The goal. And if they're going to make the most money by grabbing some YouTube star or whatever and having them wrestle matches, they're going to do it. So, that's fine. Mm-hmm. That's fine. It's their job to make money. It's not their job to put on the best matches of all time. So,
of course. Final question, man. Where do you think you see the wrestling business as a whole heading to, as we're about to step into 2025, and as a collective, where do you see it heading to in this next year or next couple of years?
I think exactly what I was just talking about is probably the direction that it's trending. Mm-hmm. I think that, and I hate to say this because I'm a wrestling purist. I love wrestling. I train at one of the best pro wrestling schools in the world. I nobody loves the art of in-ring professional wrestling more than me. I think it's trending towards just like YouTube people and celebrities and just kind of like spectacle and memes and stuff like that, because that's just where money is right now.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
People seem to like that and they seem to enjoy it. So like the more that the reality of the situation is if you're even moderately athletic, WWE has enough resources where they can teach you how to get through a pretty good professional wrestling match, especially if it's with someone who's really good, like a Seth Rollins or like a Roman Reigns or whoever. Mm-hmm. They can step by step kind of do this for you. And I think it's going to start to trend more and more in that direction. They're going to start having more and more sort of people who aren't wrestlers doing wrestling stuff and doing memes and things like that. I think we're already seeing the meme thing with these one-word catchphrases that everybody can just quote and just say.
Yeah.
I think it's going to continue to trend in that direction. I'm not saying that's a bad thing. I don't think it's just what pro wrestling is. It's a silly nonsense. It's always been silly nonsense, right? It just went from really jacked guys screaming and their faces turning red, going, from that, which is just a silly, memorable thing that children go, that's funny, and then they change the channel or whatever, to a different kind of silly, memorable thing. Now it's goofy nonsense. It's just everybody knows what pro wrestling is, right? There's the enthusiasts, and those are the people who tend to watch more and more and gravitate towards different styles, and they tend to be into the the technicality of the matches a little more. But then there's your normal casual fan, and they just want some silly nonsense to remember and to get their mind off of their job or whatever. And that, you know, that's a big piece of the puzzle too, and that draws a lot of money. So I think that everything is going to have its place, but yeah, I think it's going to trend more and more in that money-making direction, which isn't a bad thing.
No, not at all. Well, thank you for taking your time to be with us today, and we're very so appreciative to have you on the show, man. You have a good day.
Yeah, for sure. You too, guys. Thanks for having me.
Hey guys, thanks for tuning in and watching the video. You know, it was a really big step with me and Sean interviewing DIJAK. It was a really cool experience, but the fun doesn't have to end there. You can look at some more WWE content on the link below, and it'll bring you to where we're talking about a possibility or rumor of a game that's gonna be maybe coming back. Thanks, guys.
Feast your eyes on DIJAK.